Okay, good morning. This week we are back on the farm and we are going to be discussing the farm infrastructure and the 2 new sheds that are going in that field down the bottom. But before we do, a little catch up the top. Last time we were here, obviously we were doing all the logs and the bits and bobs that were there. That is all done now, thank God, that is finished. We've got elevation back in, they're doing the brickwork now, because when we cleared that area and all the bunds were gone, all of a sudden every time you come through the gateway, there was this big white great mass of concrete panels along that shed. So your eye immediately, instead of being drawn to the lovely brickwork and the bio unit brickwork building, your eye was immediately drawn across there. It was always the plan. We built it in such a way that we set the drip sill and the cladding out so that we could brick skin it like we've done with this one, albeit it's a little bit more difficult because that cladding is already on. Getting that last brick in up the top or under the drip sill is a little bit tricky, but ultimately it's coming together now. It's starting to look the bomb. The other bit that we've done up here is Ditty and the digger driver and myself, we layered all that soil in back across, so all the areas that were sort of scalped and just the clay was showing, that soil has been laid back over. We've had Richards in, they've come in, power harrowed it all, seeded it now. We're due a load of rain tonight, so I'm hoping this will start to germinate and get going, and this will be back to field and everything will be looking the absolute bomb. So down on the other site, we are now ready basically to strip this site off, get it hardcored up and start thinking about foundations. So in the past, we have done a lot of discussing about the levels on this new site here. Now when we did the pig sheds originally, them 2 sheds were sunk into the ground and there's a retaining wall on the high side of the site there, which means that the pig sheds are ultimately sat lower, which suited the rest of the site. So when we got this field, obviously we've discussed it in the past, but the levels again fall away from the pig sheds down to this low spot in the field. And the last thing we really discussed on here was that we were going to have this step in the site, so we would have the one building sat lower than the other building. So first things first, we need to get the site stripped off, get all the topsoil off and start looking at the levels so that we can really make our minds up what we're doing. Here's one I prepared earlier. Now, what we've done, Ditty the digger driver was here anyway, so while he was here we decided we'd have a go stripping the topsoil off, having a look at the levels. So we got the laser out after we'd stripped the topsoil off and sort of pushed it down into a bund along the bottom end of the site there. Once we'd done that, obviously we could see there wasn't a great deal of topsoil on actually, there was probably only 6 or 7 inches or so of topsoil and then we were down on the decent clay. Once we started to look at it, it then became quite apparent that the step in the site wasn't necessarily needed if I dropped the site low enough on this side to use that material as a cut and fill, because that then suits what future plans I've got on both sides of where these 2 new sheds are going. The weather has been with us for the last few weeks. I know the rain is coming now, or is with us now should I say, but we took the opportunity, we cut that site out, so we've cut it back slightly further more towards the pig shed on this side here to give us the material to fill the low spot, if you remember, that was over on that bit there. So we built the clay up, we've built it slightly on a slope so that we've got a bigger wedge of stone at this bottom end to the top end, so that the water that's soaking through the stone drains off, because it does get quite wet and boggy here, so we don't want it doing so while we're doing the building work. So that's what we've done. We've sort of slightly chamfered the clay off, only ever so slightly. I think there's only 50 mil of fall over the whole width. And then we've put 50 mil more stone in at the bottom end than the top, so like I say, that water can run off. But now it does mean that I've got to go back to James in the office because I've had a change of plan. We are no longer stepping the buildings. So the last video that you watched of here in the infrastructure where I changed all the drawings, I'm sorry James, you've got to change them back. So I'll ring him in a minute. But I've started to look at the positioning of the buildings now. Now, when we did the plans and the planning, obviously we've got our set measurement effectively from the pig shed out. Now I've set that up, that absolutely works perfect, so that's brilliant. We've still got that air gap that we need for ventilation between the 2 buildings, and it does give us this area that we've got at the bottom here then where we can set our permanent fixture handling facility up, which is what we desperately need for when we've been TB testing and what I've been whinging about all the time. So we've got the space there now, that's nice and tucked away that we can do that in. It doesn't interfere with anything else that's going on, and at the same time it's close enough to all the buildings that we've got on the farm to be able to access with cattle without having to run things around in a stock box. Ramp wise to the site, it does mean that we've got this bit of a steep ramp here going in. that's fine because there's another ramp going in on the other side of the site anyway. So we've got an in and an out effectively of our cattle yard. And it does sort of finish the site off. The buildings are roughly, I've not marked them out with the theodolite yet, but they're roughly where the blue lines are. I've just sort of paced them out this morning, well, with a tape measure, and set them out. And that sort of gives us a bit of a scope then, because I've started to look at the next stage, which is obviously the silage clamp that we were talking about, which planning is now in for. So hopefully we'll get the answer on the silage clamp. I know we're going to miss first and probably second cut, but at least we'll have somewhere for the back end, and especially maize. That's the big one for us. We've got 1 clamp's worth of maize that we want to fill September time. So we've got to get that done and get on with. But now we've started laying the site out, it's just sort of positioning everything to make sure that we're not on top of each other when we come to load the clamp, empty the camp, or load the buildings, empty the buildings. Let's have a look. So working our way down from the pig sheds, we've got obviously the pig shed there, which was sat on the lower level compared to the rest of the site. And then what we've done is we've dropped it again here, because this ended up being this bit of a dead area effectively that we wouldn't have been able to do anything with. And on the higher level, it become more of a nuisance, sort of, what do you do with it? So nice down low, tucked in. We've used the clay for the cut and fill, and at the same time we've got this little sort of hollow here that we can pen off and put our pens and our permanent race then fixed up with the crush. And then as we work our way down, we've then got the back of the first shed just sort of here. Now, if you remember the layout and the design of the shed, the back here at the center point is where I've got my calf pen effectively split into 2 for the 2 halves of the building. So we've got to be able to get in and out of this door here, so we need that element of lunging room. And at the same time, I love that tree, so I don't want to lose that tree at all. And there's the element of hedgerow behind it, so that is effectively from there that way there is a natural ditch, which is what the water from the pig sheds are presently piped into, as in the rainwater, the clean water from the roofs, and that goes off down there, follows the brook. So we don't want to lose any of that. So we've set the building so effectively we're starting a good sort of 4 meters or so from the edge of the canopy of that tree. We have, on paper it was 9.252 meters. Taking all these high up shots, you better not be getting my balding side. No, it was 9.25 meters, but I've increased that by a few inches. Mark needs the extra inches, everybody knows that, but I've increased it a little bit to 9.5, which is only the depth of the steel in all fairness. So from a planning perspective, nothing alters, but it does just give us that extra bit of room, which for the telehandler coming in and out with a spreader bale, or whether it be when we're mucking out, or the way in which the 2 feed fences I want to shut, or the gates, that works a treat. Then I've lost the 2 doors effectively on the ends of the building. So we're not having a scrape passage. It's going to be a loose bedded sort of area. So it's box muck anyway. So we're not scraping slurry out. And at the same time, when the muck starts building up within the building, it only pressurizes the door, starts pushing the door, then you open the door and you can't shut it again, so you have to get the telehandler anyway. And most of our work we always do through the feed fence, because all of our feed barriers are all hinged. So every time we want to bring cattle in and out, clean anything, we're just taking the pin out, we're opening the hinge feed barrier, and away we go. So I don't see the benefit of having them doors on the corners of the building, because it's not really the way that we work. By losing them doors, it means that I can have 2 sort of sheeted gates or hinge gates off the corner stanchion that will effectively then close 180 degrees to shut this alleyway off between the 2 buildings. So whether it be a sheeted gate and we keep it low to the ground and it sort of combats any TB issues or potential issues because no badgers can now get to where the feed is, or whether it's just sheeted gates because it's where we want to handle cattle at some point when we're sorting bits and bobs out within the sheds. Because these 2 sheds, if you remember, this is where I want the freshly calved cows coming down to with the calves at foot. So we don't want to be carving in here, we want to do the carving in the sheds the way we have been doing them, and then we want to bring the calved cows down and put them in here so they've got a nice clean environment. Back of the shed, we need to get the access through to that door that's sitting at the centre anyway, so there'll be arguably a driveway up the back. And we've got about a metre of fall where we've done the cut and fill now. This is probably the worst point of the site for the cut and fill, because as we work our way up, it's not that the field starts rising anyway. So that works a treat there. The only bit that I've got a little bit of an issue with is here, because this here is where I want the silage clamp, which is the 3 bunker style bays, to go in here. But what that means is that's brought it quite tight here, where we've only got about an 8-metre gap between the two. Now, bunker 2 is absolutely fine, because there'll be enough room to lunge past the corner of the shed and back up. It's just this bunker 1 here, which that's going to be a little bit tight. Obviously it's fine because you can pull between the 2 sheds and back up, or you can pull that way and back up. But it's when you start filling that shed and getting closer to the front, and we want to tip the load the other way, we're a bit tight on room there for the tractor to come down and then obviously buck rake from that point. Like the nose of the tractor will be too close to the gable end of that building, and I never wanted the yard to be tight. So from the planning we've submitted, we've got a 10-metre, I think, gap. It works better from that side of the site if it's only an 8-metre gap here, but I think that's going to make it too tight. So I think we'll leave it probably as it stands with this 10-metre gap, and it just be a little bit tight on that last bit. I mean, obviously, push comes to shove, we've got the loader that we could shove it up first before the buck rake comes in, but in an ideal world, we'd have it all done so that that didn't matter. But I don't want to encroach too much on the other parts of the farm by moving it back too far. So there we have it. That is the 2 buildings. Obviously the infrastructure of this side of the farm, I think we've pretty much got nailed on. Like I say, I'll ring James in a minute while I leave you guys with a montage, but farming wise, apart from that, we've had some more cattle on the farm. We haven't had any calves. We've had a bit of a gap now for the last 2 or nearly 3 weeks actually without any calves. But regarding livestock bits and bobs, we've been muck spreading. We'll come back to that in a separate video on the farm. So if you like what you've seen, hit subscribe, ring the bell, and I'm going to leave you with a tiny little montage because Clayton was helping me, Papa G, Ditty the digger driver, and all the other people that we had here doing this job instead of recording it. Montage, and I'm going to ring James. Boom.